Hey everyone, welcome back to General Knowledge. In this video, we're gonna take a look at some of the lesser known countries in Asia and the Middle East. Again, if you live in these areas or just have an interest in these type of things, these are all gonna be sort of obvious to you, but maybe not for some people, and maybe you'll learn one or two things about the countries that you may not know. So let's get started. First off, Kyrgyzstan, a landlocked country in Central Asia. It's a mountainous land like the one in Afghanistan. It borders Kazakhstan to the north, Uzbekistan to the west and southwest, Tajikistan to the southwest, and China to the east. Its capital and largest city is Bishkek. It has a history that spans out over 2,000 years, being inhabited since fairly early by several tribes. Its mountainous terrain has helped maintain its ancient culture, but throughout history they have been occupied by a few civilizations and empires, until they became independent in 1991 with the fall of the USSR. Their culture has a lot of Persian, Mongolian, and Russian influence, and the 5.7 million people are mostly Russian speaking, following the Muslim religion. They were first settled by the Scythians, and were later occupied by the Mongols, the Qing dynasty, and the Uzbek Khanate of Kokand, also being a part of the famous Silk Road. Russia kept the region from 1876 to 1991, and with the fall of the Soviet Union, Kyrgyzstan finally became an official sovereign state. Next, Brunei, technically known as the Nation of Brunei, the Abode of Peace. Brunei is a country located in the coast of the Borneo Island in Southeast Asia. It's bordered by the South China Sea and by Malaysia on land, having a population of over 400,000 people. Brunei was once an empire, and Sultan Bolkiah is said to have ruled most of the Borneo Island during his reign in the late 15th century. Then the Spanish arrived. The war with the Spanish wasn't that damaging to the country, but it marked the beginning of their decline. In the 19th century, the Sultanate started ceding parts of its land to British explorers and to the British Crown. Soon enough, a British colonial manager was assigned to Brunei itself, and it became a British protectorate, always keeping a sultan as head of state, a system that still lasts until today. They were occupied by the Japanese in World War II and only gained their independence in 1984. Today, it's supposed to be the world's 5th richest country, because of all its oil and natural gas production. In 2011, it was also considered one of the only 2 countries in the world with a public debt of 0% of their GDP. Going back to Central Asia, we have Tajikistan. Very similar to Kyrgyzstan, this is a landlocked mountainous country. Mountains cover 90% of the territory, bordering precisely Kyrgyzstan to the north, China to the east, Afghanistan to the south, and Uzbekistan to the west. It has a population of almost 9 million people and is home to the Tajik people. Throughout history, it has been settled by a lot of different cultures with a lot of different religions, from the Buddhists to Christians and Muslims. Occupied by several empires such as the Achaemenid Empire, the Samanid Empire, the Mongols, the Timurid dynasty, and finally the Russian Empire. It was first an autonomous republic within Uzbekistan, but was then granted the status of Soviet Republic with the transition from the Russian Empire to the Soviet Union. In 1991, like all other Soviet republics, it became independent. However, a civil war quickly followed, and only recently has it achieved a little political stability, which comes with a lot of authoritarian accusations by the West. Most of the population speaks Tajik, a dialect of Persian, and follows the Islam religion. Going a little southeast, we have Bhutan, the Thunder Dragon Kingdom. Located in the eastern Himalayas, it borders India, Nepal, and the region of Tibet, which is ruled by China. It's the second least populated region in Asia, with only around 800,000 people. The independence of Bhutan has endured for centuries, and it was never colonized. It was also part of the Silk Road, establishing a good relationship with the British and especially with India during the rise of communism in China. Their national identity was always based on Buddhism, and their head of state was their spiritual leader, being ruled as a Buddhist theocracy, since 75% of the population follows Buddhism. There was a civil war in the 19th century, but other than that, the country hasn't really been involved in any conflict. It only transitioned from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy in 2008, holding its first election. In Southeast Asia, Bhutan ranks first in economic freedom, ease of doing business, and peace, and is considered the least corrupt country since 2016. However, it's still considered to be a least developed country. Next, Uzbekistan, the third of the 4 Istans we're going to be looking at. Uzbekistan is also in Central Asia, also a former Soviet republic, and also a Muslim country. It's landlocked and bordered by 5 other landlocked countries: Kazakhstan to the north, Kyrgyzstan to the northeast, Tajikistan to the southeast, Afghanistan to the south, and Turkmenistan to the southwest. Early on, like its neighbors, it was settled by the Scythians. For the most part of its history, it was part of the Persian Empire, with a small exception when it was ruled by the Greek Macedonians. Then it was conquered by the Muslims, who brought Islam to the country. It grew rich as a stop in the Silk Road, but then came the Mongols and killed the whole ruling dynasty. Coincidentally, one of the cities was the birthplace of one of the most famous grandchildren of Genghis Khan, Timur, who established the Timurid Empire. After this, several Khanates ruled parts of the region, until it was slowly incorporated into the Russian Empire during the 19th century. After the fall of the USSR, they became independent. Its capital is Tashkent, and it has a population of a whopping 32 million people, most of them being natives, with a few Russians in the mix. Moving to probably the most known of this list, home of the friendly visitors we just mentioned, Mongolia. Mongolia is sandwiched between Russia and China and occupies the ancient territory of Outer Mongolia. It's the 18th largest and the most sparsely populated country in the world, with 3 million people living in over 1.5 million square kilometers. Ulaanbaatar, the capital and largest city, is home to about 45% of the country's population. Interestingly, up to today, 30% of the population are nomadic, and horse culture, very present in the Mongol Empire, is still very important to society. The majority of the population is Buddhist. It was always ruled by nomadic tribes in the past, until 1206, when Genghis Khan established the Mongol Empire, known as the largest continuous land empire in history. His grandson, Kublai Khan, conquered China and established the Yuan dynasty. But after the dynasty collapsed, the Mongols retreated to Outer Mongolia, where they still live today. In the 17th century, they were absorbed into Qing China, declaring independence in 1911 with the decline of the dynasty. In 1924, they became a satellite Soviet state, until transitioning to democracy in 1990. The last country in Central Asia is Turkmenistan, bordered by Kazakhstan to the northwest, Uzbekistan to the north and east, Afghanistan to the southeast, Iran to the south and southwest, and the Caspian Sea to the west. Its capital is Ashgabat, and the country has a population of around 5.6 million. Its history is very similar to its neighbors. It was settled by a bunch of civilizations, had a great importance in the Silk Road, became Muslim, was incorporated into the Russian Empire in 1881, and then gained its independence with the end of the Soviet Union. So, now that we're done with Central Asia, let's move south to Laos, officially the Laos People's Democratic Republic. It's located in the Indo-Chinese Peninsula, bordered by China, Myanmar, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand. Its historical and cultural identity dates back to the kingdom of 1,000,000 elephants under the white parasol, a pretty long name. This kingdom existed for 4 centuries and was one of the largest in Southeast Asia. In its decline, it broke into 4 different kingdoms, and in 1893 it became a French protectorate. It was occupied by the Japanese during World War II and gained freedom in 1945, autonomy in 1949, and its independence in 1953. However, a civil war followed shortly, seeking to end the monarchy, and this resulted in a victory by the communists, which then became the rulers. Today, it's a one-party socialist republic. Its capital is Vientiane, and it has a population of almost 7 million people. Of these 7 million, 55% are Lao natives, living in the lowlands, while most of the other 45 are indigenous hill tribes living in the mountains. Next, we have a country which is also pretty well known, Taiwan. Taiwan calls itself the Republic of China. It's an island near the People's Republic of China, Japan, and the Philippines. The island was first known as Formosa, and it was inhabited by natives before the 17th century when the Spanish and the Dutch arrived. It was his own kingdom for a while, but was quickly annexed by the Qing dynasty. After the Sino-Japanese War in 1895, the Chinese ceded the island to Japan. Meanwhile, the Qing dynasty and Imperial China came to an end, and the Republic of China was formed on the mainland in 1912. In 1945, with the Japanese surrender, the island was returned to the Republic of China, but then the Chinese Civil War took place between the Republic of China and Communist China. When the Communists won, the Republic government fled to Taiwan in 1949, claiming to be the legitimate government of China. It even represented the country in the UN until 1971, when it lost its seat to the People's Republic. It has seen a period of quick industrialization and development and transitioned from an authoritarian regime to a democracy. Today, China still claims Taiwan as its territory and has instaured the One China policy. And finally, Papua New Guinea, an independent state which occupies the eastern half of the island of New Guinea in the southwest Pacific Ocean, just north of Australia and east of Indonesia. Its capital is Port Moresby, and it has a population of over 8 million people. It was discovered by the Portuguese and the Spanish during colonial times. Apart from the indigenous population, the country has always been ruled by foreigners since 1884, being divided between the British and the Germans. It became independent in 1975, after almost 60 years of Australian administration, still keeping the British Queen as its head of state. Papua New Guinea is one of the most culturally diverse countries in the world, and it's also one of the most rural, with only 18% of its population living in urban centers. There are 852 known languages in the country. It's one of the world's least explored countries, culturally and geographically. It's known to have numerous groups of uncontacted people, and there should still be many undiscovered species of plants and animals in the inner regions of the country. One of the most strange features of the native population was cannibalism. Even though it became almost completely eradicated, it still took place in the late 20th century and still leaves traces within certain social groups. So, those are a few of the lesser known countries in Asia. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and leave your opinions in the comments below, as well as suggestions for other countries to talk about. I will see you in the next video.